Thanks so much. All right, good morning again. So I'd like to, I'll tell you what, this is Dr. Paul Isely, so maybe you want to make an introduction of yourself to everyone out there so they know a little bit about you.
Sure, I'm Dr. Paul Isely. I'm an associate dean at Grand Valley State University. I've been here about half my life, so I don't like to say how long that was. I run a team that is particularly focused on how the economy is moving and how that will affect people, particularly here across Michigan.
All right, thanks for being here. So my alma mater from a little ways ago. So you have a lot of people here in IT. So they're evaluating AI. So as we have this discussion today, we're interested maybe a little bit more in how these trends will affect IT purchasing and such. So maybe want to talk about that intersection between IT spending and the economy. How do you see that?
Sure. So IT spending right now is relatively large. So if we took the worldwide IT spending, it would basically add up to the economies of California and Texas added together. So it's not a small sector, and it's relatively robust. It has two parts of that, which is only right now about 10% of the spending, which is AI and cybersecurity. All right. What we're seeing is that those two parts are going to grow so fast that it will make IT spending accelerate faster than the overall economy. So it's a pretty robust set of stuff right now for IT.
So AI will increase. Wow, you said by a factor of 5. What the increase?
Right. So right now this year we're spending about $200 billion. We get about 10 years out. The expectation is about $1 trillion. Again, you got to take 10-year forecast with a little bit of salt. All right. So we have lots of people worried about is accelerating too much. So as I was preparing for this, I don't know how many headlines I read. Was this too big of a year in capital spending for AI? What's happening with this? And what we can say is everybody has to spend right now. And if you go back to the 1990s, and we had that dot-com bubble, which sort of burst as we went through the Y2K timeframe. Did it burst? It burst for some. If you were holding Netscape and Yahoo and AOL, your bubble definitely burst. In 2000, if you were holding Google and Apple, it didn't burst. In fact, you're extremely wealthy today. So what's happening right now is everybody's having to spend because we don't know who's going to win. All right? And there's going to be winners and losers, and that's going to shake out over the course of the next 5 years. But we don't know who those people are going to be yet.
Yeah, it is interesting. The mentions of AI in earnings calls and just all these unicorns and all these startups that are AI something. Mm-hmm. So I'm pretty sure they've worn out the .ai domain by now. Mm-hmm. You see these gigantic market caps today on the bigger guys. Right. So I couldn't even tell you how many unicorns and how many more startups have significant AI components to them, but when does that consolidation happen? When does, I'm hoping a bubble doesn't burst, but when does the consolidation happen? And if for some reason it does burst, I don't know, what would be a prediction for something like that?
Yeah, so part of it is you have to look at how people use AI, all right? And the first AI native generation is in high school right now, all right? If you look at my son, who's in 8th grade, and you watch how he interacts with artificial intelligence online and how they're playing with it. There's no cost, there's not a direction that they're trying to do. As adults, we're all trying to solve a problem with it. We're all trying to go from point A to point B. With play, You're going here, 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 here. And that's what's happening right now with those kids in middle school and high school. So if you project 5 to 10 years out, those people are now the people who are in the workforce using it. And they're going to have a mentality on how to use it that nobody in this room can conceive of yet. Because they're making it up now as they go. Right? So if you look with the dot-com boom, it really was about a 7-year cycle. All right? So if you consider that AI really took off in the last couple of years, we're really 5 to 7 years out before we really start to see firms shake out. And it's a little different now than it was then, because you need a lot more capital for AI than you did when you were putting together some web pages in a search engine. All right? So that really affects how fast people are going to run out of cash and how soon the investors are going to have to choose, I have to go with this horse. I can't wait. And so we really think as we get into the 2030 time frame that we'll start to see a fallout, and we're going to see the weakest players really start to disappear.
I want to take just a quick tangent. There's not necessarily an economic angle to this, but one of the things I think about is, and now I'm 47. If I wanted to figure something out, I wanted to write a report, I would have to go to the library, pull out my library card, go to the section with encyclopedias, go to the right encyclopedia, read about whatever the thing is I need to write a report on, take notes, create original content, and submit it. And one of the things that I'm concerned about is we eliminate all of these things, possibly the things that make us human, into just this, into putting it into an AI prompt. So I hope the AI doesn't make us less human. I guess that's one of my concerns.
Well, it is making us more productive. So we're already seeing that in the data.
Now that's something I'd be interested in hearing. So because I wouldn't imagine that this would have already had a significant impact on productivity.
It's already had a significant impact. Our productivity is going up 1/3 faster than it was before AI really started to become embedded in things. So if we start looking at things right now, let's compare ourselves to the 1990s, the last tech revolution. All right, so you started the 1990s, you got Word, Excel, and Windows all at one time, and we're all still using them today. All right, as we went through the 90s, we all learned how to use that, and productivity was extremely high. We were seeing productivity run at 2.5% at times through the 1990s. In normal times, productivity increases at about 1%. So 1% means that each year, each worker makes about 1% more stuff than they did the year before. Now they're making about 2.5% more during the 1990s. So as we came out of COVID, things continued to pop along at that 1% level. If you take when ChatGPT became usable, all right, and realize AI is being used long before ChatGPT. And what that did, though, was it made it accessible, and it made it known to every manager in every business across the United States. All right? And it immediately started to affect how things happened. In fact, it was released in the fall. By January, we already saw ad copy for real estate firms being written by ChatGPT, all right? And they were not having to hire as many people as they did before, all right? So if we look right now in year-end reports, we already know of at least 300,000 people who have specifically been stated as they've lost their jobs because of AI, all right? And those people are in the middle of the pack. So what are we seeing now? Now we're running faster than we were before, to the tune of, over the course of the last 3 years, AI has sped us up by $1 trillion. All right, $1 trillion. It's added $1 trillion to the $30 trillion that we make here in the United States. all right? And it's done that because every worker is more productive. We don't need workers in things that are less productive, like call centers, all right? We can redeploy that labor someplace else. And this is going to cause a sea change because now we're having people who are losing their jobs, a lot of them in their mid-50s, and their return on investment for retraining is about 8 years. If you're 55 and you lose your job because you don't need it anymore, you don't have enough time to retrain and get back in the workforce. So there's going to be a group right now who is made much, much worse off by AI. Even though as an economy as a whole, we are much, much better off, and we're going to accelerate that as we go through the next 10 years. So this is a big deal for us right now.
A lot of questions. So what would you say to someone whose job might be in jeopardy today, or they could possibly see just the end of their career because that would be consumed by AI? Let's just say this person is between 50 and 55. What would you tell that person today?
Well, the first thing you need to start doing is you need to get out of a single silo. Because right now, remember, just like with robotics, and with machine learning, it was easy to teach machines to play chess because there's a set of rules that everybody does. So it's easy to use AI to replace someone in a call center because they have a script, all right? They're already playing to a script. They just have to be smart enough to know which part of the script to be on, all right? So the more you can actually document your work specifically, the more in danger you are for AI. All right? So what you want to be able to do is you want to be able to be the person synthesizing information. You want to be the person who's communicating information across silos so that you're taking something from the business side and talking to the engineering side and then talking to the marketing side and being able to negotiate that. So the more you have skills that cross multiple domains, the longer it will be before AI can attack that.
Maybe a similar or a related question might be, I struggle with this being, is this the great tool or the great replacer, a little bit of both? I'm just curious on your thoughts on this, because you mentioned contact centers. Like, we see a lot of AI technology within contact centers. I don't know, for some maybe very mundane, like just very simple tasks that maybe some of those have been automated away, but those higher levels, those level 2 on up, I don't know if AI is just there yet. So maybe talk to me about like what you think short-term, long-term AI as a replacer or as a tool.
Well, I can tell you when they talk to CFOs across the United States, so if we look at the Atlanta Fed survey of CFOs, we can see that in 2023, they talked about AI being something that workers would leverage and make them more productive. When they asked the same question in 2024, they said they were using AI to replace workers, all right? So if you look at that part of the business, the CFO, whose job it is to think about how we're making money, they had a sea change in how they were thinking about AI between those two time frames. So it becomes more complicated than just the AI being able to answer the question. So if you go to a level 2 question, AI might not be able to answer that. The question is, can they get it to the right person better than a human did out of level 1? All right. So I know when I call my help center, I get somebody who probably isn't overly trained, and they often will send me to the wrong level 2 person. All right? If AI does a better job of routing to the right person, that's a huge productivity increase. Because now we're not taking 2 specialists at a time, we're taking 1. And this is where it's really starting to become very interesting, because it's on the edges being able to help people make decisions faster. Obviously the dream is to get to Star Trek, where Geordi says, show me how this is, model this and do this, or create this hologram that shows me this person working. And you'll notice that Geordi never does a calculation. He's able to ask the question and it happens. We're not there, We'd love to be there. Right now, we're on track to get there, but we don't know when. All right? One of my litmus tests is when somebody says, oh, it'll be 5 to 10 years, it means they don't know. And when we ask when will they get to that level of sophistication, they say 5 to 10 years. Why? Because no one's in their job for 5 to 10 years. So by the time it gets there, you're not in trouble.
Let's pretend for a moment there's no CFOs, there's no CIOs out there, and you have a project, and maybe it's AI related, and you need to make a case to the CIO or the CFO about why you need to put this in place. It's simpler to make that case if something is broken, or there's just there's a piece of software that's getting end of life or whatever. But maybe this is something that increases productivity. Like sometimes those are difficult things to capture and to present. As you talk to all these folks, how would you, if let's just say you're in some tier of IT below CIO and CFO, how would you present that to your top stakeholders of why you need to do these productivity or AI centric projects? Why take them on?
Yeah. So in reality, a lot of what people are doing with AI right now is not sophisticated enough to make a big difference in the world. Okay, there's places where it is, like factory floors, where it's much easier to do quality assurance and things, where it's a controlled world. But the pitch is we have to practice with this. We have to fiddle with this. We have to look around with it because our competitors are. And if they find the key to this, and we don't have anybody who has a sophistication to be able to operationalize new activities with this, if we haven't had our managers think about how to deploy this within a functional field, then when somebody makes that breakthrough, we won't be able to catch up because we won't have the internal knowledge. So I don't normally tell people to do it based on fear, but a lot of what's driving the AI investment right now is I'm really, really worried I'm going to be caught flat-footed because my competitor is going to figure this out before I do.
One of the things that I think about as well is, as all of you interview people and you find good people and you say to yourself like, okay, I want to hold on to these people for a long time. If you have wood paneled walls in your office, it's not a good look. Mm-hmm. So it means you probably don't invest in your building and your people. It's a predictor. And when I see these tools, I think to myself, you're arming your employees with the tools that they need to succeed. There's a part of this that not only makes them more productive, but I think that it speaks to, hey, we're investing in the organization. We want to retain our people. We want to empower them. So I almost think about this more from less about productivity and even more about retention, because if you're not doing these things, maybe somebody else is, and you're going to lose that person to an organization that is better empowering their employees to be their best selves.
Exactly. I mean, if I'm an employee and I walk in and you're using old business processes, I don't believe my job is going to be there very long. And I don't believe that you're going to be giving me the skills I need if my job no longer. So you have to have some of those cutting edge things happening. And if you don't, workers will get bored and they'll leave. Realize Gen Z doesn't want to work the way the rest of us did. Gen Alpha certainly doesn't want to work the way that many of us did. And so they're not going to tolerate sitting down and having to crunch through a spreadsheet for us or through a manual hand table, because the guy who did my job, I use a lot of spreadsheets. The guy who did my job before me had a calculator, and I pulled out his sheets, and he had pages and pages of handwritten calculations. That was the difference between 1980s, 1990s, and 2000s. Those Excel skills, they're not going to get me to the end of my career, and I'm an old guy now. All right, I need to have and be instituting AI into how I'm interpreting the information, because I can interpret many more cases with AI than I can doing it myself individually using a spreadsheet.
And just so that everyone here knows, because sweet Jesus, I'm just getting used to Gen Zers. What is Gen Alpha?
Gen
Sorry for all my Gen Zers. I love you and everything, really.
Gen Z ended in 2012 or 2010, depending on which of the competing versions of you look at. So Gen Alpha are people born since 2012, and they're now in middle school and young high school, and they will be your workers in about 5 years. And their view of the world is different than millennials, and Gen Z is only a small tweak, I think, on millennials to me. Alpha is far more entrepreneurial. We're seeing the late Gen Zs and the Generation Alpha group be extremely entrepreneurial. They're thinking about, how do I do that to turn it into something that I make money on? How do I make changes? I could do this and sell it and make money. I hear that constantly as I talk to young people. And when we talk to millennials, we hear a lot more about the quality of life and work-life balance and all of those types of things that are very important. I think Gen Alpha has decided they're going to get work-life balance by coming up with ideas and using those ideas to make money and not have to work as hard as everybody before them did.
Interesting. We'll take a little bit of a right turn here. There's a significant number of folks here that are here to learn about the latest and greatest with AI and cybersecurity. So I'd like to understand your thoughts on what the effects of cybersecurity, cybercrime are on the economy. So what are your thoughts there?
Well, we know the direct effect. We know worldwide we spend about $200 billion on cybersecurity. About 80 billion of that is here in the United States. We also know the size of reported cybercrime. So the FBI reports that cybercrime last year was about $12.5 billion. All right. The problem with cybercrime is the vast majority of it isn't reported. A lot of companies don't want to report any of it because it suggests that they have weaknesses that they don't want to expose. All right. That's always the hard sell for this, is in reality, the benefits of cybersecurity isn't the $200 billion that I've spent. It's not the cost of the $12.5 billion that we know about. It's about avoiding something. And that's the hardest type of thing to calculate, because now I'm trying to say the value of something that I'm giving you is something that never happened. And so we have to think about what would happen if we didn't have this. So we do know what's happening with AI, and I'm sure that you guys will talk about this extensively today, is that AI speeds up the cyber criminal. All right? Not only does it speed them up, but it now makes it so that one of my favorite strategies in the 90s and early 2000s was being protected by the law of large numbers. The chances of them even finding me in the billions of accounts out there was very small. All right? Now they can test all of those billion and do it pretty fast. And that's changed the equation on the risk. So cybersecurity is really an insurance policy, because it's really about making sure that if you do have this happen, it won't actually affect my business processes. When I talk to CISOs and folks who do cybersecurity across even the businesses I'm in, is they have a hard time convincing the rest of the C-suite to provide enough resources for them to provide the protection they need. And the reason that is if I'm a CFO, I just heard we're spending $80 billion in the United States to protect ourselves from $12.5 billion worth of losses. All right? The numbers aren't right. Without having a robust cybersecurity team within your company, you're actually looking at the risk of the entire company. All right? And so understanding that it's not, I'm spending $8 to save $12. I'm spending $8 to save $1.20. It really is, I'm spending the $8 in order to avoid an infinite loss. Because the companies, other than those that are too big to fail, like Target, who have experienced these, many of them are going out of business. And certainly a large chunk of them, the CIO, the CFO, and the CISO, and the CIO, have all lost their jobs as they come out of it. So it's really helping the C-suite understand that averted risk. And that's a hard thing to do.
Yeah, the same question I had a little while ago in regards to AI for cybersecurity here would be, imagine going to, not even your CISO, maybe this is like, CISO going to the CFO. Ultimately, these things are going to go to the CFO, and you're making your case for this. Is it almost just like you're making this case like you're buying more insurance? I mean, if you had to arm these guys with an approach that might be effective with your CFO, what's the wording? What's the language? What would you suggest?
Well, what you really have to do is make real the potential loss, all right? So in many ways, cybersecurity is they're losing because of their own success, all right? The fact that you averted all the problems makes it seem like things are pretty safe to people who aren't sitting there day to day and watching the thousands of attacks that are happening on your system every hour, all right? And so you have to make sure that they understand, yes, right now there's no cost, but realize you just need one person to get through. Just one person to get through. And now, look what happened to your competitor. Look what happened to Target. Look what happened to, and you have to be able to show those. What happens when just one person gets through? So it's not that I have to avoid 90% of the attacks. I actually have to avoid 100% of the attacks because it only takes the one. And that is a hard thing for a lot of CFOs to get their mind around because there's nothing else out there where one person breaking through causes the entire thing to crash, all right? This is the one place where that's true.
We've got about 10 or so minutes left, so I want to talk about maybe past and future. So past, one of the questions I was mentioning in my opening keynote was how we avoided a recession that literally 100% of economists, perhaps even yourself, I don't know, predicted. A lot of the G7 countries out there went into recession. They're still maybe either stagnant or in decline. We somehow avoided that. So how did we avoid that over the last couple of years?
Well, there's a couple of things that happened. The first thing that happened is we have an independent Fed, and that independent Fed was able to act very quickly to put liquidity into the markets and paid very close attention to making sure that businesses and banks and consumers could do their day-to-day business. Not every country has that. We know that the growth of a country is highly coincident with the independence of its Federal Reserve. And that's been studied over and over and over again. The second thing that happened is we pumped a lot of money into the economy through the government, all right? A ridiculous amount of money. In fact, at no point did government spending as a percentage of GDP reach anywhere close to what it did in 2021, other than 43 and 44. So only in the depths of World War II did the US government spend more money than it did during that time frame. And in fact, we know now in hindsight that they spent too much. All right, and we know that because we know the inflation was mostly demand driven. And why do we know that? We know that because prices went up and people bought more stuff. That only happens if on the income side. So as we were going through 2023, at the beginning of 2023, we had numbers that told us how much money consumers had. And we knew how fast they were spending it. And about in the third quarter of 2023, that money would run out. And so there was a lot of thought process that consumers would have to pull back in the third quarter of 23. All right? They didn't, but we also got some news in October of 23 that the Fed had miscounted the amount of money consumers had by $1 trillion. And consumers spend about $200 billion a month. So instead of the third quarter, they didn't run out of money until we got into the beginning of this year. We have a second problem. Half of our economy is in recession, and the other half isn't. And the people in this room are not. So they perceiving that there was never a recession. All right? We have been in a manufacturing recession in the United States now for 18 months. And in fact, here in West Michigan, if you did June to June, our total employment was down because of decreased employment in manufacturing. And why is it manufacturing? Because in reality, what's happened is people under 40 ran out of money. People over 40 actually still had more money because their house was worth more. They didn't have to buy. Weren't exposed to the inflation the same way that young people were. So as we watch the behavior of people under the age of 40, they're behaving like it's 2009, which was a very bad recession. If we look at people over the age of 40, they're behaving like things are pretty good. So the press is making the old economist joke come true. And the old economist joke is there's 3 economists out and they're hunting. And the first economist shoots at the deer and he misses far left. And the second economist shoots at the deer and misses far right. And the third economist goes, "We got him!" Because the average was in the middle. All right? So a lot of what's happening here is we're missing the pain of half of our economy because we're taking the average, and the top half is doing so well right now because our houses never lost value. And we were able to do our loans at 2.75%, and we're never leaving that house. All right? We have that. So in many ways, we got the recession that economists were talking about. But the tremendous amount of wealth that had been built up by baby boomers and old Gen Xers kept the entire economy from hitting there.
Well, so this is where maybe I ask you about that crystal ball then. So where do you see us going, short term, long term? So any big predictions from yourself?
All right. So now I have to wander into something that I'm told to avoid when I'm on stage, which is politics. But one of the things that was slowing down manufacturing coming into this year was the uncertainty over who would win. All right? In reality, most of the time it never matters who wins because all the government does is set the playing field. Then businesses and consumers figure out how to play the game, and they do a pretty good job of winning, right? The government doesn't control the economy. They just set the playing field. And once we know what the playing field is, we can then play the game and make money, all right? Well, the difference between what Trump was saying he wanted to do and what Biden or Harris said that they wanted to do was so far apart that businesses had to pull back on how much they were investing because they didn't know what the playing field was going to look like when they came back into the game after the election, all right? And that affected us here in Michigan particularly harshly because the difference where they stand on subsidies for EVs is so far apart. So if you walk through our manufacturing sector here in Michigan, they didn't know, are we going to be building a lot more EVs or are we going to slow down on EVs and build a lot more ICE cars? And as a result, that's why we had that manufacturing pullback. We've now resolved that uncertainty. So the only question that we have left is how will that uncertainty play out in that Trump's professed desire is to create uncertainty. And he stated that explicitly, so I'm not saying anything that's not something that Trump himself wouldn't say. Okay, so what are we looking at? We're looking at, number one, those interest rates will be lower as we go into spring. We're looking at another 50 to 100 basis points as we get towards summer. We're looking at that uncertainty has gone away, and we know what it's going to be. And certainly by April, we're going to know which policies the Trump administration feels are most important. All right? By April, we're going to have businesses able to make investment decisions based on how they know the playing field is going to happen. So as we get into spring, early summer, we really expect the economy to start to take off again. All right? We've already seen a peak in the stress for young people. So their stress is already, the symptoms of their stress is already starting to come down. And normally that happens about a year before we really start to take off again. And that started at the beginning of the third quarter. So we're really looking at next summer, things really speeding up. And then this technology component that I'm saying will have us grow at about twice the rate that we grew between 2000 and the start of the pandemic. So we're going to grow relatively quickly because of this technological innovation. All right? So the only thing that can mess that up is if we damage the U.S.'s reputation. And we have to understand that here in the United States, we pay lower interest rates because we're the safest place in the entire world to save your money. So everybody saves their money in the United States. And as a result, it drives down our interest rates and makes it far easier for us to invest. All right? That's because we have a strong Federal Reserve and we have the rule of law. So as we watch through this, and I'll only bring this up because Musk gave a big like on maybe we should get rid of the Fed. We have to take a step and understand that those are the two things that help us with that. We can give those things up, that's fine, but we know countries that don't have those, and we know that they pay 1 to 1.5% more in interest rate than we do here. So that's one thing that we're watching right now, and it's something that a letter by half of the Nobel laureates in econ are most worried about is how that plays out.
Thank you, Paul. I think there's a couple mics out there for any questions that you'd like to ask of Paul. And a quick time check, 10:15 or 10:25? So maybe, what's that? 10:20. All right, perfect, thank you. So we've got a couple of mics out there. Anyone would like to ask a question of Paul Isely? So we've got a question over here.
I was going to say, I stunned everybody. And I put my hand in a political blender, even though I didn't really do that.
Dr. Isely, Matthew, thank you for the fascinating conversation. So I work in cybersecurity, at least I have a long career in cybersecurity, and I would like to respond to your comment about cybersecurity is like insurance. I'm very sorry, Dr. Isely, I don't agree with you on that. Unfortunately, CFOs do say that, and that's a very myopic view. So I guess what I'd like to respond to that is to say, when you're in cybersecurity, if you're a CISO, you're balancing value protection versus value creation. That's the first thing. Second, really, just talking about it, insurance is not good enough because the lens by which you build the business case depends on the industry. So for example, we've all heard of the Internet of Things, haven't we? So imagine, and there's not always the best discipline. So there's a manufacturing company that some wise soul went beyond IT, built a 5G connection, got the supplier to do work, somebody hacks it, takes down the line. For how many days? We know that that company is going to pay a certain amount of money to the customer, a lot of money per base hours, 1. 2, your reputation is torched. You lose sales. So that business case is completely different from the one person hacking. So what I'm simply trying to say is, all of us thought leaders, yourself, myself, we got to get away from this car insurance analogy because we are not helping the industry? How do we educate it? So that's just my reaction. I thought I'd throw it out there. Thoughts?
Excellent. So in me talking about this being like insurance, it's really a cost versus risk calculation, and that's an insurance calculation. All right, the difference with cybersecurity compared to a traditional insurance company is they actually stop some of the bad things from happening. All right. So I'm not trying to equate this to State Farm, and I often wear a red shirt with khaki pants. My wife cringes, but this is about understanding what the cost is, and in some ways it's perceived as a low probability, high cost event. And what I'm trying to help you understand is that you have to increase the CFO's understanding of the probability of the event, because the probability isn't actually a low probability event. The probability is actually a very high probability event. We just stopped it. And if I don't have enough stuff, I can't stop it. So I hope that clarifies a little better what I was trying to say.
Thank you. Got about another 90 seconds or so before we're going to get everyone to stretch their legs, and we'll get going for a quick little networking break. Any questions before, one last question before we wrap it up? Okay, please, go ahead.
Thanks, guys. I appreciate the conversation. All right, so I'll see if I can make this short. So we were talking about the 5 or 6 years down the road where the generative AI and things like this are really going to take off and kind of hockey stick up for some of these businesses, right? And right now you talked about how there has to be a little bit of fear generating in order to get businesses to jump into this particular market. Here's where my concern is. So large companies have the capital to invest in these kind of technologies. You're talking about the recession that I've been talking about for a very long time for automotive for these last 18 months. So companies like mine that are like $85 million, trying to make that kind of investment and convince everybody to make this investment, it's a little hard to hit that hockey stick that's going to come in that, I'd say, 5 to 8 years. How do I convince the rest of my C-level folks that we do need to invest a lot higher than what we're doing today?
Yeah. Well, I think you just gave the entire reason why you have to invest now. Everybody has to invest now because we don't know who's going to win, but we do know that if you aren't doing it, you won't win. All right. It's sort of the reverse of the War Games Treaty, which said the only way to win the game is not to play. With AI, the only way to win the game is to play, because if you're not doing it, you will not get the productivity gains that your competition is getting, and you will be out of business, and it will happen sometime in the next 10 years, all right? It's the reason why we expect that there will be extensive AI investment right now, and it favors the big guy. It certainly favors the big guy. So we really expect that this is going to lead to consolidation, and we're going to see some of the small folks have to be bought up or move around or change their market in order to survive.
Thank you for the question. I'd like to thank Paul Isely for spending some time with us this morning. So we are on to our networking break. So